I'm going to need you to take a seat right over there. That's not up to me. Now you know, and I know why you're here.
You may know him, scratch that, you should know him from his 40 some odd years working in the true crime space as a television journalist, reporter, his time at NBC, of course, To Catch a Predator, as well as being a producer and host of various different true crime programs, and now Takedown with Chris Hansen. Please give your warmest welcome to a dream guest, dream come true of mine, Mr. Chris Hansen. Thank you so much for being here, Chris.
Mr. Funk Nasty.
Yes.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. So many people that meet you, it is like the worst day of their life.
It is.
Today is one of the best days of my life.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I watch your work, and you do a great job with your platforms and all the different stuff you got going on. It's great. It's great to see success, you know?
Oh, I appreciate that, Chris. I was listening to your podcast, which, by the way, I love.
Well, thank
Predators
you.
I've caught. It's fantastic because you get the aftermath, which a lot of people wonder about when they're watching these shows, right? But you mentioned you were up in Marion County, 41 predators.
41 in 6 days. We just got back
That
a
is
couple
crazy.
weeks ago. Well, it is. And it's, we had one other sting many years ago when we were doing To Catch a Predator. It was our third investigation ever. The first one in which we collaborated with law enforcement, that was in Riverside, California. That was 51. But since then, this 41 in Marion County is a bit of a record. And some of those guys, they went out and got later. In other words, the crime is committed, as you probably know, in the chat. So sometimes, even if they don't show up, they'll go get them and face criminal prosecution as well.
Well, it's, they're engaging in the chat. So, of course,
right.
It doesn't matter if they show up or not.
The chat is actually, the strongest evidence of the entire case. That's the backbone of the case because it shows intent. It shows the solicitation. It's using a computer in the commission of a crime. Enticement and any other crime is linked back there. Now, when they show up, if they possess, child porn or something else on their computer, or if they bring something that contributes to the delinquency of a minor, that can be added on, of course.
What has this been like for you just coming back? I know you did Hansen versus Predator, but there was a gap between that and To Catch a Predator, and they still show up. They're still coming in droves. They're still showing up. And a lot of them know you now. It's like they're asking whether this is a Chris Hansen thing in the actual chat.
Yeah. They ask about that. They ask about the local sheriff, if the sheriff's been active, like Grady Judd or Chris Swanson or, Billy Woods in Marion County. We work with sheriffs and police departments all over the country now. And you would think that these guys would get it. And I think it is a deterrence. I think it does keep some people away. It makes people think twice before they conduct themselves this way online. But it speaks to the volume of activity now. When we started these investigations in 2004, we merely had decoys on AOL and Yahoo and that antiquated platform you may or may not recall called MySpace. It was before your time.
Just before my time, but I know of it.
And so that was it. Well, today, as you know, there's been an explosion in the number of platforms upon which adults can approach children for illicit reasons. And so it's harder to track these guys down, but there's more of this activity than ever before. And I liken it to a heroin addict. The heroin addict knows that there's a 20% chance there's fentanyl in the heroin, and it could kill him. But they want the fix. The addiction is so great. The need to have it is so great that they roll the dice and they take that chance. The predator is no different. They want what they want. They want this illicit relationship with somebody who's underage, whether they're a stone-cold pedophile or a predator. And they know there's a 20% chance that it's me and or any one of the law enforcement agencies with which we work across the country. And they roll the dice. They take that chance. And they do say it in the chat. It sounds like a Chris Hansen To Catch a Predator or a Chris Hansen Takedown thing. I've seen this before. Tell the sheriff I said hello. And sometimes they'll say that. And we think, good, he's not going to show up. He's walked away. We've had a deterrent effect. And then 2 hours later, hey, you still available tonight? You know, they think about it. They stew about it. And this is what they want. And so they go get it.
Well, yeah, the fact that it's in the back of their head that this is a sting and they're still coming. And even when they walk in the house, you know, sometimes the decoy isn't at all what they look like in the picture. No. I mean, and this is not a knock on the old show. I find it very funny sometimes how, you know, a couple standout decoys have looked laughably overage, but it doesn't deter these people. You walk in and see a 12-year-old with 5 o'clock shadow, and no, they're gonna sit down and talk. You're gonna come out,
and you know, they want it to be true. They want this fantasy to be true, so that they'll push it to the limit. And they've thought about their excuse if they get caught, right? What am I going to say? Well, I was worried about this child. I was just going to check on him or her. The Good Samaritan excuse. But to that, I always say, well, why don't you call 911? We had a guy show up with Mark Moon, the sheriff in Blount County, Alabama, and his team. This guy shows up who had known Sheriff Moon from a church group. The guy had had some challenges in life, and the sheriff was a mentor to him. He had the sheriff's cell phone number in his phone. And he was telling me that he just came over there to check on this girl because he was worried about, you know, her well-being. And I found out later he could have just called the sheriff direct. He could have texted the sheriff and said, hey,
it's so easy.
Listen, I'm worried. There's this girl online. I was messing around in a chat room for adults, lonely guys who are looking to hook up. And I came across somebody who was underage. You might want to run over there and check this out. That's all I had to do. Yeah. But that's not what he did. He showed up and he had a conversation with a decoy who did look like she was 14 or 15 years old. And had we not been there, and had there actually been a child there, there would have been, you know, a relationship.
Yeah, the excuse is so common. I just came to talk. I just came to talk some sense into her. I just came to save the girl, whatever. And then you pair that with the fact some of these guys are driving 6 hours to the house. You know, they've already shown their
recently intent. In Louisiana, a guy came from Arkansas. He worked at an auto dealership, sold new cars, and drove through the night, communicated several times, stopped at least once to use the bathroom, and showed up at 6 o'clock in the morning, damn near. And you know, he had gotten off of work, done whatever he was doing, and decided he was going to make it. And he was going to hang out for 3 hours and go back to work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's shocking.
They'll fit it in. They'll be going to somebody's house after, a family member, and then they'll stop at your sting.
That too. We had a guy who worked for TSA a year or so ago in Florida, Polk County, Florida, Sheriff Grady Judd.
Oh, yeah.
And this guy shows up and he throws an absolute fit. How is it going to do anything? This is fixed. This is all, you know, 100 different reasons that don't make sense, 100 different defenses that don't wash. And here's the guy who is standing at the security line when you and your family are trying to travel. It's one of those guys.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got kids. He's got a spouse. And they're all waiting for him at some family get-together. And where is he? Trying to exploit a 13, 14-year-old kid.
I was watching one of your Takedown episodes where the guy, he was his mother's, 91-year-old mother's caretaker.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to be with her. She's going to have to find out the news after the fact.
Right.
Does that kind of stuff weigh on you, like the collateral damage in these cases?
The collateral damage always weighs on me, and it's one of the most disturbing parts of this. Is, you know, there's a wife at home, a girlfriend. There are children who have to deal with this. In this case, and a number of others, there are elderly parents who, you know, these guys are caretakers for. And now he's locked up. He's not getting out for at least 24 hours. And the sheriff's department or the police department has to send somebody out there to do a welfare check on this poor elderly person that this guy is supposed to be taking care of, the woman or man who raised them, to whom they owe this duty. And instead, they're out here doing this. Now, nobody's going to begrudge a guy who's single, who tries to meet somebody, and people meet online. I get that. But when it's so blatantly wrong, legally and morally, and when it has the potential to harm a child for life, I mean, think about that. Even these guys who send explicit photos, if that's a real child on the other end, that's in some cases the first experience that child has had with any sort of intimate imagery. And that scars a kid. I mean,
No,
it
it's
really
horrible.
does. Just the chat scars a kid. And that's why, we remain so committed to do this. If you had asked me 21 years ago when we did the first investigation, if 21 years later we'd still be doing it, no, I thought we'd do it a couple of years, maybe, and move on to the next thing. And we do other stories. We do other documentaries related to this, unrelated to this, all in the crime sphere. We've got some very exciting things coming up on TruBlu and some things that, will end up on other networks. And as I mentioned earlier, we do some stuff with Fox News. And we have a new podcast coming out, also in the crime space, but not as much predator focused. It's all very fascinating. But there's no question that people know me for this particular franchise. And even the criminals know me for this particular franchise.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Well, like you say, you thought maybe you'd do it for a couple years and maybe they'd get the message. Maybe you wouldn't see this as much, but they just continue.
I would love to do a cooking show in Italy or in my homeland in Scandinavia, or that'd be fun in my senior years as a journalist. But I don't see it in my near-term future.
No. Well, it's like, I just find it so compelling still. It's just as good as it ever was. And it is really, it's one of the most compelling television moments because you're interjecting right at this pivotal, horrible moment in someone's life. They've made the worst mistake they've ever made. And you're right there.
And I really do, and I mean this sincerely, both talking to you and when I speak with the predators I've caught, I really do want an explanation. Sincerely, deeply, I want to know what makes them want to be with a child for illicit purposes. I mean, what is it? Is it the fact that you were exploited yourself as a child? And I have guys tell me that story. We had this last sting in Marion County, we had a guy absolutely break down about how he was exploited by an elderly couple in his neighborhood as a child who took advantage of him sexually, and then he acted out, or at least that's the story he told. And I've heard that before. Are these guys born this way? Do they see an opportunity to groom somebody and make them their own? Is it a possession control thing? Is it just the way they're wired? I think it's a lot of different things. There's no, it's like a plane crash. There's no single point failure. Usually a number of things are going on in their mind, but I'll continue to press and push and try to figure it out. And sometimes the guys are honest, and sometimes, they just try to run whatever silly story that they've got. But it's the collision of taking viewers inside the commission of a felony as it happens, right? You don't get a chance to do that in the unscripted world very often.
No.
We do hidden camera stories on all types of different things and crimes, and we do take people inside the story and this journey of discovery. We try to do that with every story we tell. I always have. But in this particular instance, you see the chat, the crime is committed, you see the guy show up, and depending on where we are, he may come in and the first person he sees after the decoy is me. Sometimes the first person he sees is me. Sometimes he sees law enforcement, then me. And I can argue each one of these scenarios as being, the most interesting. Sometimes if we're in a jurisdiction where the law enforcement detectives talk to the guy first, it loosens them up for me a little bit. Sometimes they tell the detectives to pound sand, but they get starstruck and they fanboy when they get to sit down with me. And we've seen that before too. And that's helpful to the prosecution. So, and I have no problem with that.
I definitely enjoyed, I think it was Mike Manza, the one who said, "I'm Chris Hansen, no you're not. I'm Chris Hansen, no you're not." There is I've heard you talk about this before, but the spectrum of predators, you have heavy hitters, the career pedophile basically. And then, you'll have young guys who come in and they're lonely and they just decide to screw their life up with this decision.
Right. They get going with this fantasy, and they figure, well, I'm 21 and the girl's 14 and it's only 7 years. It's a big 7 years between 14. We're not talking about 47 and 40 years old. I mean, this is a big deal. I mean, you could, we have this discussion all the time. When an 18-year-old shows up for a 15-year-old, should that be a crime? If they were in high school together and dating and the parents consented and everybody consented, should that be a crime? It's a gray area, I'll admit.
No, it is.
But if you're talking about a stranger who's 18 hooking up with somebody they don't know who's 14 or 15, I'm going to argue that that's a crime. Now, the potential for that 18-year-old to, have a lesser penalty and to realize that was wrong and never do it again is probably in most cases pretty good. So you have to, think about that in terms of punishment. Does somebody like that get caught, scare the heck out of them, report to a probation officer, get off the sexual offender list in a year and never offend again? I would hope that there's a good chance of that. But it also speaks to the internet. And, people say things online they wouldn't say face to face.
Yeah.
And once they say something that's very sexual or graphic and they get away with it, they become emboldened. And this sort of talk becomes acceptable to them. And they think they can do it again and again. And then they go from getting off on the talk and getting off on the fact that they're fantasizing about somebody who's younger than them, who they may find attractive. And suddenly the fantasy doesn't work anymore. They want to fulfill the fantasy. And that's when we see them knocking on the door. But I still stand by my overarching theory on the age thing, that the damage posed by an 18 or 19-year-old is just as bad as the damage posed by the 39, 40-year-old.
Oh, definitely.
It's the same damage.
Yeah.
The punishment in some cases should be different. We should have some sort of understanding about how they got there. I think we went overboard 20 years ago with the, registering as a sex offender for, catching a kid in college urinating in public. That shouldn't be happening. 16-year-olds dating a 14-year-old, they shouldn't have to register as a sex offender for life. I mean, we need to apply common sense here. And I think we're in the right area of doing it. But I'll tell you this, in severe cases, some states, Idaho specifically, have the death penalty. Idaho might be the only one, but it's the only one that I can say with confidence who has it. That has it. And I'm starting to come around to that for a couple of different reasons. One, if it's a severe case, the guy deserves the most severe punishment. But it also gives prosecutors a tool to ensure that that person gets substantial prison time. If they take the death penalty off the table in a plea, I'm not talking about a sting case. I'm talking about in a case where a child was really physically harmed by a man. I think that's worthy of pursuit.
No, I totally agree with that.
I've never been a big proponent of the death penalty but there's a part of me who thinks that, it's better to suffer in prison for these guys. It's better justice. But who am I to make that judgment? I mean, that's up to the survivors of the victim to make that judgment, at the end of the day.
Even with the aftermath of some of the guys you've caught, I do find it interesting listening to you talk about that. I mean, I watched the follow-up with the doctor who patted the girl on the butt. And that was that the first time you'd done that, where you spoke to a predator afterwards?
It's the first one I've spoken to in great detail. I've interviewed a couple of them for the podcast.
Okay.
Caught. And, I usually kind of catch these guys off guard. Sometimes it's compelling. Sometimes they talk. Sometimes it's, F you, Chris Hansen, and that's the end of it. Sometimes they say F you, Chris Hansen, and then they call back 20 minutes later and, they want to talk for 30 minutes. But the doctor was the first time where the guy really sat down and as best as he could, tell me honestly. His wife's in the room, his lawyer's in the room.
She stuck with him through all that, which is just nuts. But you could still see the effects. They've been married
for 40-some years or 30-some years. You maybe try to work through it. There was no evidence in his case that he had sought underage girls in the past. There was no child pornography on his digital devices. He had gone to these sites for sex, but this was the first time that we could find out, that law enforcement could find out, where he sought sex with somebody who was underage. And I think the idea of it was enticing to him. I think he fully knew what he was getting into. I think he was fantasizing all day about this girl having Oreos stuck in her braces. I think it's bad, horrible crime he committed. But the chances there of him not offending again, I think are pretty good.
They're definitely higher than many predators, I'd say.
But we also have cases, we had a case where a guy showed up in 2006 in Long Beach, California, in a series of guys we caught where judges treated these cases like it was some, reality TV show with no consequences. I mean, they might as well have done something bad on The Bachelor. I mean, the guy gave him, 2 hours in the county jail or the city jail, and they had to pick up trash on the side of the road for Caltrans. That was it. And we had a guy who got that slap on the wrist, the Long Beach special, and all these years later, 18 years later, in January of this year, they catch him with a real 14-year-old girl.
Oh, my God.
And he's now facing serious criminal charges. And he was using newer apps, some I had not heard of before. Now we're very aware of it, but he was physically with, and had been grooming a real 14-year-old girl. We've had cases, for instance, in Montgomery County, Ohio, where the DA's office said, well, at the end of the chat, he said, or we could just hug and hang out, cut him loose pending further investigation. 2 weeks after he got busted in our sting, they find him in a neighboring town in a motel room with a real 14-year-old girl with video set up so he can capture the images of him sexually exploiting this child. And the mom finds that the daughter's missing, does a where's my phone, pops up at the hotel, calls the police, cops go to the door, doesn't answer, get your ass out here, close the door behind him. Who else is in there? Nobody. Who else is in there? Well, they peel away the story and they finally go in there and this girl is cowering in the bathroom. They rescue her and this knucklehead finally goes to prison. Bad guy.
That kind of stuff has to frustrate you, especially if they're in your investigations.
That's why, the podcast is such an important component of what we do, because we go back over these things. It gives me, the ability in another platform to expose this stuff. And the beauty of us having our own streaming crime network is that because we own it, we own the content, we own the distribution, we can, if I need to go back over and do another story or do a follow-up, I do it. And that goes out to all our subscribers. It goes out on our FAST channels. And it goes out on our YouTube, and it goes out on Fox News in many cases.
Yeah. Well, I've been on TruBlu
cases,
I think it's one of the best subscriptions out there. It's very cheap, and you get it. I love the original To Catch a Predator, and that acted as almost a highlight reel. Predators coming in, you get the highlight moments, but this, you get the behind the scenes, the chats. They show you. I've always wanted a shot of you in the back room in the dark, waiting in the shadows, and we get that. You're looking at the chats with the decoy and the police.
Yeah. Because in the streaming world, it can be 12 minutes or it can be 42 minutes. It's whatever we deem
whatever you decide
is necessary to tell the story. And that's where, my world is going into the streaming. So I feel very fortunate to, be in the position to have this. Now, look, without 20 years or 21 years at NBC and having that platform and having that backup and that opportunity to travel the world and travel this country and do all kinds of great stories, with a network that at the time was willing to spend the money. No, I don't have the platform to do this. So I'm very grateful to everyone with whom I worked at every step of my career, whether it's local news in Detroit and Tampa and Lansing, Michigan before that, or all those years at NBC or ID or some of the things I did in between. Each one of those things was a building block that led me to be able to do what I do today. And it's a phenomenal opportunity. And
you really adapted with the way things have been going.
Yeah. And you look, when you hit upon something that becomes as popular as Predator, and it's so ingrained in the digital world. So I've been on Twitter since 2007, before I even knew what Twitter was, now X. The kids at NBC put me on it. Did I fully utilize it at the time? No, I didn't understand the potential power of it, just like I didn't, necessarily understand Instagram at first. And, look at TikTok now. I've got to be the only 65-year-old guy on TikTok with, 700 and whatever, 27,000 subscribers.
Doing numbers.
Yeah.
Doing numbers on all these platforms.
Yeah. And so it's about doing what needs to be done in your field. It's also about, being cognizant of how to stay relevant in terms of communicating and being adaptable, being flexible. My oldest kids are in the business, one behind the camera, one in front of the camera. And, I teach them all the time. I said, it's a phenomenal business, but you can't get so intractable. You have to be able to move and flow with it.
Yep.
And if you can do that, then it's a very rewarding enterprise.
It's the thing. It's very popular still. People want to see this stuff.
Right. And it's a way to get into a lot of other projects. We were starting a documentary on Roblox. And who knew that we just did this thing in Marion County, coincidentally, but who knew just in Marion County, they had a case where they arrested a young man for exploiting children on Roblox, as young as 10 years old. And then we had, in a separate case, a victim in Marion County who was exploited by a man across the Atlantic Ocean in the UK, both in this county, in Central Florida. So if it's happening there, what's going on in the rest of the world? And that's going to be a big documentary. And it's a great talking point when I, communicate with people about, being aware online. Because at the end of the day, parents really have to monitor what their kids do. And
now, that's a very important documentary. I mean, it's pretty scary out there how easy it is for these people. I've got young kids now, and I worry about that sort of thing.
Roblox is like a video game within a video game, and you can create your own realities and your own scenarios and your own games, essentially. But it's something where you can communicate with a lot of different people. And there's a currency called Robux. And apparently what some of these bad adults are doing is giving Robux to these kids and asking them to do different things. Some of those things involve, taking explicit pictures or getting their siblings to do things to each other and getting video of that. And it's really quite shocking. I mean, how do you wake up in the morning and think about that? I mean, how does that thought ever even come into the mind of a normal human being? Oh, I'm just going to get on a video game today. After work, I'm going to find a kid who's vulnerable, maybe in a single parent household, and I'm going to find out if they've got siblings. And I'm going to convince them slowly by giving them a reward to go do something that they would never think of doing on their own. That's essentially what's happening.
It takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of planning. I mean, there's different levels to that.
Yeah, and it's all of which, deserve severe prosecution. Because what's going to stop the guy from getting out and doing it again, getting on the next platform? And it's not just Roblox. Excuse me. It's a lot of different platforms. It just so happens that Roblox is one of the most popular. And a lot was made a few weeks ago when Roblox said it was coming out with age verification. The age verification is only good if somebody's under 13 trying to get on, because 13 is acceptable. 13 is the sweet spot for predators to exploit children. So yeah, it's great for your 10, 11, and 12-year-old. And one of the victims we found, who was 10 at the time, we interviewed her mother. But, 13, 14, and 15-year-olds are among the most vulnerable. And so what does it do at the end of the day? You have to sit down and talk to your kids at the very first moment that they have access to the internet. You need to say, look, this is a wonderful tool. It's wonderful access. It's an incredibly phenomenal and fascinating world. But there are adults out there who like to trick children. Yeah. And children don't like to be tricked. And so if you start by framing it that way and then increase the conversation as they get older and have more access, you're at least off to a good start. But they also need to know that if it gets sideways and it gets too much for them and they do something wrong, that they can come talk to you. It's the same conversation you have when your kids are 17, 18 and they want to go experiment with alcohol or weed. You got to say, look, I don't think it's a great idea. I would ask you not to do that at this young age. But if it happens and you don't have a designated driver, I'll come get you and we'll discuss it the following morning. You got to give kids an out. I've seen parents, I've sat across from 4 sets of parents whose kids committed suicide because they were ashamed after being targeted in sextortion attempts by con men half a world away. And had they just gone to their parents and say, hey, I effed up, pictures of my privates are out there, the parent would have said, look, don't do it again, knucklehead. Graham is not going to see it. And in 2 weeks, nobody cares. It's gone. It's over.
Yeah.
But in that moment, and it happens to good kids with good grades who are athletes because they're the most embarrassed, they've got the most to lose as they head to college, they can't see their way out of it. And they choose suicide, which is, understandable, but God,
that's devastating.
It's devastating. It's devastating, the poor kid and the parents. It's horrible. It really just seems like nowadays you have to create an environment in the home where your child can come to you with that stuff. Yeah, they have to. You have to. You have to make them aware that can happen. Because you can't monitor everything that they're going to do. I mean, there's software. There's some amazing stuff out there where you can, keep track of things, block different areas. But you're safe no matter what laws we pass, no matter how many stings I do or how many stings law enforcement does around the world. They're still going to get hit up at some point. Yeah. And so your best defense is the one you create in your own home.
What has your family thought of you doing this all these years and even now starting this back up again?
I think they're, they sort of in some ways take it in stride. They know that it's a passion project for me. Yeah. My oldest two who are in the business understand it, professionally as well as personally. My oldest son, who's behind the camera, works on some of the stings sometimes. As well as, things he does in his own business. So they get it. They understand the importance of it. They also understand the importance of having a brand and franchising yourself with something that is making a difference in the world. Yeah. And it allows you, if you can do that, it allows you some flexibility in pursuing things that you like to do. When I was in local news, I used to call it feeding the bulldog. You cover the stories you need to cover every day, and you have 2 or 3 projects that you work on and you work on and you work on. And whether they're hidden camera things or big scoops or investigations, you just keep chipping away at it. And when it's ready, it blows the socks off for everybody. But you can't just disappear, for 6 months and work on one thing. You got to do the stories every day. The stories that are going to get you known, the stories that are important, the stories that have compelling interviews that you do. And so, it's a combination of lessons for them. And I always tell the story that my 2 sons went to high school with kids whose dads did a lot of cool things. Athletes, television executives, film people, shipbuilders, Wall Street guys. So to have a dad on television, was fine, provided a good living, comfortable, but it wasn't that big of a deal until South Park did the Chris Hansen Predator episode. And, suddenly I was the cool dad because I was on South Park. And that's funny.
You're still kind of ingrained in the pop culture for those different appearances. Boondocks, you were on, I think, Family Guy as well.
I think Family Guy's done it 3 or 4 times. I pop there as well. Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Every season there's something. And it's great because, people ask, like, I'd be upset about South Park. And, those guys are funny and creative. And they don't tell you when they're going to do you. My agent texted me. I was out on the West Coast on a shoot and said, South Park's doing you tonight. It's pretty funny. And about 20 minutes later, I get the text, it's taken a dark turn. And, but, look, if it brings attention to a very important topic and it enhances the dialogue and awareness, I'm fine with that. I've been at this a long time. I've been a reporter for 42, 43 years on television. Yeah. So, my skin is pretty thick. And, you're not going to go out there and do these kinds of stories and be successful unless you have thick skin.
It's a sign of flattery at the end of the day, really.
It is a sign of flattery. And again, if it adds the awareness and the dialogue, so be it.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Well, I mean, To Catch a Predator and Takedown, they're unexpectedly funny shows on their own because, like, you're doing legitimately amazing work. You're catching somebody as they're about to, in their mind, they've decided they're going to abuse a child.
Right.
And then you have openings with the transcripts. You're very quick in the moment, just to give you a compliment. I mean,
I appreciate that.
Your awareness in the moment to hit somebody with a one-liner is just fantastic.
Well, I learned a long time ago that there's a part of this that's dark humor.
Yeah.
Without question, right? And so I lean into that.
Oh, yeah.
And I lean into that because it makes it the unique content that it is. And it also, besides disarming somebody who's really, really mad at me for catching them and bringing the audience inside the investigation, it's part of the entertainment value, if you will. It sounds weird to say that when you're going after evil people who are seeking to exploit our children, but there is a sense of dark humor there, and I play into that.
Well, it does seem like that would be something incredibly hard to pull off, but you find those moments.
Well, there's a lot going on at the same time, right? I mean, it's look, we make this as safe as it possibly can be for law enforcement, for my crew, and for myself. But we're catching somebody doing something really bad. And depending on the state we're in, it's easy for somebody who's never been caught before to carry a weapon. And so a lot goes into it behind the scenes, in terms of enhancing our security. But, part of the reason it's become so popular and stayed so popular is that it's edgy. There is a certain intrinsic risk in doing something like this. But that's part of what makes it special, part of what makes people watch it. Now, again, I know things that go on behind the scenes that I don't share because you can't, if you share your security, it's not security anymore. And it is, I believe, safe to do what we do. But, it is inherently risky. There's just no two ways about it.
Well, yeah, I always think about that too, like the amount of risk involved. No one has taken a swing. I remember the Rabbi came at you sort of.
But, the funny thing about the Rabbi, and I've told this story in the past, is that the Rabbi really wasn't coming after me. The camera angle made it look like he was coming after me. And in the moment, we didn't know what the hell was happening. But in hindsight, what happened there was that he had sent some very explicit pictures of him performing oral sex on another man to someone he thought was a 13-year-old boy. And I had those pictures, copies of those pictures. So I slid him across, and he saw it. And he went off, and he was diving to get those pictures back in the moment, thinking those are the only copies that we had. Obviously, them, and we could get as many copies as we wanted. But Ronnie Knight, my security guy, and dear friend moved in as he should to cut him off before he could get to me. But looking back at it, I think he was after the pictures as opposed to taking a poke at me. And
it was just full panic mode.
Physically menacing guy, a mean guy. We had been trying to get him to sit down and do an interview.
Oh, wow.
That was our very second investigation in Herndon, Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. And obviously this is a big deal that a rabbi has walked into it, because he wasn't just a pulpit rabbi. He worked for an organization that brought Jewish kids into Washington, D.C. to learn about Israeli politics and, Jewish influence in the nation's capital. It was a big job, big organization, and a very reputable organization. And there was not any evidence that he had abused any kids within the group, right? But he's a rabbi. He got caught in a sting trying to meet a 13-year-old kid. And when he walked in gleefully.
Yeah. When he came through the door.
Yeah, like he owned the place with the bounce at noon on a Wednesday. So, this is going to make news. So he would call, and again, law enforcement wasn't involved in that sting. They made the cases after the fact. That was the only two that we did that didn't have law enforcement collaboration. Now, the FBI prosecuted him, arrested him, and he went federally. The Fairfax, Virginia police investigated, prosecuted several of the other cases. And from then on, we collaborated with law enforcement on every case. But he would call my producer almost weekly and berate her. How dare you cast me in that light and have hidden camera video and blah, 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 blah. And, she would tell him, look, we're happy to do an interview with you, but if you think it's going to prevent us from using the video or the chats, we're going to use it. And it's going to happen. So he walks in and he says, okay, I'll sit down and do the interview. So we're at the Ritz Hotel in Georgetown, Washington. Crew's set up in a hotel suite. Ronnie and I are upstairs waiting for the rabbi to show up, David Kaye. And he comes in and he's clutching this soft briefcase, like one of those Land's End briefcases, jammed full of stuff. And he says, sit down. I'm like, we kind of control the environment here. So don't be yelling at me. And he said, we'll do the interview, but you will not use my face and not use I said, we've been through this before. We are going to use your face. We are going to use your name. He's clutching this briefcase the whole time. Ronnie's getting anxious because he didn't know what's in the briefcase. And I said, whatever. And he stormed out of there. And that was the end of it.
That's hilarious.
I had called down to the crew. I said, start rolling now, because he may sit down and run out, and I want that on camera.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, get everything.
So, but because this was in the lobby, we didn't have a crew in the lobby, but that's exactly what happened. So he's prosecuted. They figure they'll do a bench trial in front of a judge because, a jury would be more emotional. The judge found him guilty. And in sentencing, departed upward on the guidelines because he had found that the rabbi had lied on the stand. This was the judge, the federal judge.
Yeah.
And so he got sentenced to, I think, 6.5 years. And I think he did 4 to 5.
And that's fairly lengthy when it comes to these guys, because some of them only do 18 months, something like that, right?
Some get probation. If they don't have a criminal history, they'll get probation and registration as a sex offender, which I think is a win in that, okay, at least they're registered.
Oh, yeah.
After a report, we know where they're at, and other people know where they're at. But,
well, they have the sentence, but then they have the sentence of being preserved on the internet for the rest of their life.
Well,
poor Jeff Sokol, the pizza guy, he'll never outrun that.
I'll tell you that, you know the story about him going to court to change his name, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. So there's another guy who unfortunately has the same name.
Oh.
Who's like an insurance agency guy in the Midwest. And every time that video runs, he gets a rasher of BS on the internet.
Yeah.
It's not the right Jeff Sokol. Excuse me. And he reached out to me. He said, I know you can't do anything about that story or that guy, but would you do something for my social media that says, this is not that Jeff Sokol? I said, I'm happy to do whatever you need me to do because you're obviously, did nothing wrong here and just had the bad luck of having this guy's name.
Yeah.
But if I do that, it's going to bring even more attention to it. And maybe you should just let it die down. And that's what he ultimately decided to do. But I may have done a video for him at some point. But I felt horrible.
Yeah.
Guy.
Oh, no, that.
What are you going to do?
Just a horrible luck there. Horrible luck.
Yeah.
He's the Predator. Jeff Sokol is probably the most arrogant, one of the most arrogant. And even I watched the full unedited interrogation that you put up a little while ago, and that's fascinating because he really does stick to his guns. He really doesn't admit a whole lot.
He thought this through. I mean, the marriage contract and the whole thing, but among the most smarmy and unctuous predators I've caught. I mean, I couldn't believe it. It had been a minute between the last To Catch a Predator and the Hansen versus Predator, and we had set up in Fairfield, Connecticut, as you know. And he showed up at night. It was pretty late. Drove all the way from the Boston area to Fairfield, Connecticut. And just, the pizza, the whole thing. And then, to see him interact with the on-site decoy. So, great young woman who, was a student at Fairfield University. And I think she was taking some theater classes along with, whatever her field of study was.
Yeah.
And she was so good at it. She
was fantastic.
She was fantastic, and she got kind of tossed into it. And I had reached out on social media to her to see if she'd want to come on the podcast. So, some of them do and some don't, and I respect their privacy. That's something they did in college, and they want to dwell upon it. They move on to the next thing, and I respect that. But she was great, and she played the exact role of a somewhat nervous but precarious 13, 14-year-old who was open to a meeting and home alone. And that scenario was very believable to these predators because that is what they're looking for, and that is what exists out there. We see guys seeking parents to sell their children, foster parents. And to me, the fact that somebody would buy into that scenario indicates that scenario takes place on various
as horrifying as that is.
As horrifying as it is, it does.
Yeah.
You also see, guys wanting to act out fetish porn in real life. So if you see this, daddy-daughter stuff, as offensive as it even is to suggest that, they see that on a porn site and they want to go experience it in real life.
Yeah.
And so we see these guys looking for these scenarios that, normal human beings wouldn't look for or wouldn't even know exist.
Yeah. And you gotta take your hat off to the decoys.
Yeah.
Because that's a whole other thing.
And typically they're sheriff's deputies or, police cadets or young police officers who look younger than they are. And, they're often the first contact when these guys come to the door. And, their eyes light up, these guys, because, oh my God, you're real. We had a former cop show up in one of our Genesee County, Michigan stings last summer. This guy had been a cop for 20 years in Michigan and in Florida and, retired as a sergeant and was working at a school for the deaf and selling insurance as well. And he walks in and he was very graphic with what he wanted this young girl to do. And when she opened the door, man, he thought he had hit pay dirt. He turns around, he locks both doors, and then he's, I thought this was going to happen. What did you think was going to happen? Oh, I knew it was. And he didn't know who I was or anything. I mean, maybe in the subconscious, he had seen the show or heard about the show.
Yeah.
He was just, going to try to talk his way out of it.
I gotta say, when someone doesn't know you now, I almost audibly scream at my television screen, "Oh, fuck you. You don't know Chris?" Like, come on.
Well,
at this point,
it happens. I mean, look, and with the increase in the number of illegal immigrants that we see, they don't know.
The risk taking there is unbelievable.
Well, now in the current environment where these guys are getting deported left and right, I mean, we had seen illegal immigrants before. I think we were more sensitive to it, or we watched for it a little more. I mean, you got a guy in our last sting in Marion County, Florida, 22-year-old graduate student at the University of Florida here from India, not, exactly a high risk country for terrorists or criminals.
Mm-hmm.
And he's studying, biometrics or some crazy, high end, master's degree. And he's here on a student visa. You're not going to be here long on a student visa.
No.
And there was an attempt by the university to say, okay, hold off. Let's see what happens with the charges. Understandable, perhaps. And then, Governor DeSantis got involved, and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, got involved, and the Attorney General got involved. And, they're not going to play anymore under this current administration. They're just not. And, we're looking at a whole series of other stories looking at that, too. And that's going to be on TruBlu coming up in the not too distant future. So, start working on some of that stuff.
Well, it's exciting with TruBlu. It gives you an avenue for not just the Predator stuff. And I've seen, tons of things you've done. You Crime Watch Daily, saw that, tons of stories on different true crime cases. Your Peter Nygård thing was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was a heavy lift, that one. The Onision one, I think, was very worthwhile. And, the Onision thing was something that didn't really get onto mainstream media. It was a story that was sort of contained on YouTube and everything else. And I think there was a fair amount of resentment when I did it on my YouTube channel, because who's this guy, coming from traditional broadcast in our territory on YouTube. But look, our reporting on the thing got him demonetized on YouTube. We made the documentary interviewing all these people, including his own father, who talked about what a creep and predator he was. And we exposed him and gave voices to the victims. And so, we did something that nobody else did on that. I mean, there are a lot of YouTubers with, funny hats and thumb rings who are, doing stuff and gave people a voice too, but it never got any action done. And he was very fortunate, I think, Onision, that all this got exposed during the height of COVID and the protests associated with the George Floyd killing, because especially in that area of the world, in the Pacific Northwest, unless you killed 5 people, you weren't getting prosecuted. And so even if there were criminal charges involved to be looked at, I mean, people skated left and right during that time frame. So he's being held accountable now in a civil suit that's ongoing, and that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, but you did great work on that, and I honestly can't get over the Nygård case, because I hadn't really heard too much about that, and it's just he, in the hierarchy of these people like Epstein,
he's at the top of the list.
Oh yeah, crazy.
Yeah, and
the stuff with the abortions. Oh my God.
Yeah, and then we were working on that story, and I had known some guys who were doing some private investigative work on it. That whole thing started in a civil battle between Nygård and his neighbor, who is a very successful Wall Street guy, over beachfront property. Yeah, Nygård was doing environmentally dangerous things, and the neighbor called him out on it. And as they got into the legal battle, they started to find out all this stuff, and that became fodder for the suit. And then, we got involved in it, and some other people got involved in reporting it. And then as we were on the home stretch, I get a call from somebody who's the friend of a lawyer representing the guy who is Nygård's videographer for 2 years, who's got all this video behind the scenes. And they said, would you like to talk to the lawyer? I said, hell yeah, I want to talk to the lawyer. So then we get all that video, in the private jet and with the stripper pole and behind the scenes at the parties. And it was crazy what we found on those videos.
Well, it's like out of a movie, like just his whole estate is an amusement park, basically.
It's like Jurassic Park.
Yeah. And the guy's injecting, stuff into his face and like plastic surgery. I did see one thing where you were saying he's basically falling apart behind bars because he can't do steroids and
he's
can't
been
do
locked
all of
up. They had him, in Canada, and they indicted him here in the Southern District of New York. But it was, I used to walk by his headquarters on Broadway, and think TikTok, man.
Yeah,
it's coming, and sure enough, it did.
I still feel like not enough people know about that.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, we were deeply into it, and the New York Times did a lot of reporting on it. And I think the documentary broke. We did that for Discovery Plus, right around the same time as we did the Onision documentary, and I think the New York Times came out about the same time. They did a great job on it too. We're pretty much in lockstep on it.
I do a lot of serial killer cases. I'm very interested in true crime and stuff. Is there any case that stands out for you? I know you did cover the Unabomber, and that was at NBC before To Catch a Predator and stuff, right?
Unabomber in local news in Detroit. He had sent a bomb to a University of Michigan professor in 1985 and got fascinated with that particular case, and was able to get some information out of the ATF at the time and a little bit out of the FBI. And I think I might have been one of the first reporters to actually say that this was linked potentially, and that there is a name for this guy amongst federal investigators called the Unabomber or Unibomber. It was spelled two different ways depending on ATF or FBI at the time. And after that, there obviously was a lot of reporting, a lot of mystery, but that was back in 1985.
Yeah, that was an insane case. I mean,
and we did a lot of work on it at NBC too. We did a big piece in like 94, 93, 94.
Yeah.
And then it was, I think, 97 when they caught him, when his brother, the manifesto came out, and the brother, noticed some linguistic style.
Yeah. He just picked up that it was his brother. He just saw the writing and.
Well, everybody says you can't have your cake and eat it too. And in the manifesto, it says you can't eat your cake and have it too, which is the actual saying, but few people knew that at the time, apparently. And when he saw that, he said that's one of the many things that made him think it was his brother Ted.
That is a pretty funny way to go down.
Yeah. So he's living out in his Montana shack, which is that they had that FBI exhibit in a museum in Washington D.C. for a little bit. And it was amazing to go look at it. I'd never gone to Montana when the story broke. I covered it from New York and Washington, and they had a news conference, and the brother spoke, and it was 96, 97, someplace around there. And but to see the real shack and how small and primitive he was living, it was really quite something.
And he was out there for about 10, 15 years, right?
Yeah.
Crazy.
And he would, build these bombs, have to put them in the mail someplace. And, it was before, every move you make was captured on some sort of video surveillance. And there were pictures of him. I mean, that's where that hooded photo with the aviator glasses came from, and so many of the others. When you look back, it looked just. Mm-hmm. But, here's a guy who went to Harvard.
Oh, yeah. Very high IQ.
Yeah. The brother said, I will give you everything, just don't give him the death penalty. That was the deal. But the fact there was a death penalty gave everybody something to negotiate.
Is he still out there? Is he still serving his sentence?
The brother's still out there, as far as I know. He was someplace, I don't know whether it was a 60 Minutes piece or somebody did something, and the brother was interviewed for it. I saw it not too long ago. He died. Ted Kaczynski passed away in prison. Cancer, I believe it was. But yeah, he was in Colorado in the maximum security there.
And how you landed To Catch a Predator, was that about what, 2002, somewhere around there?
2004.
Okay.
We shot in March 2004. We did the first investigation in Bethpage, Long Island.
It's kind of this experimental thing. You're not sure
Yeah.
if anyone's even going to show up.
We had found out about Perverted Justice, an online watchdog group, and I pitched the story to Dateline, not as a separate, series or franchise, just as a segment on computer predators. And they said, "Great, go do it." And so they signed me a producer who was essentially the producer throughout the that particular series. And we wired a house in Bethpage, Long Island, and didn't know really if it was going to work. I mean, I sort of thought guys would show up, but I wasn't prepared for 17 guys to surface in 2.5 days, including a New York City firefighter.
It's wild.
Yeah, it was crazy. And then we went through the whole network routine of, well, everybody knew that this was incredible and compelling material, but how do you cast it? How do you put it together? How do you make it a news magazine piece? And so there's a great deal of meetings and consternation, and we did. And I thought we did a good job with the first one, but the reaction was such, and so many people were blown away by it that we immediately started thinking about doing the next one, which we did in Herndon, Virginia.
Yeah, I mean that. The first two you've said before there's no law enforcement.
No,
it's just you had security guys was the most you had.
Security and especially in Washington where we had so many prominent people show up. We had a military intelligence officer, we had the rabbi, we had a doctor, one or two doctors, we had a teacher, really guys from all walks of life. A guy walked in naked,
Oh yeah. Well, the guy who showed up twice, I remember that one.
John Kaye, Special Guy 29.
Yeah. Your ability to remember the names and the screen names.
The ones who stick out, I can remember.
Yeah.
I got to check the notes every once in a while on some of the others. But yeah, I mean, those are experiences you don't forget.
No. I can't even imagine what's going through your head. First Predator. You're in that house. Like, what is happening?
I'm just trying to keep my heart in my chest from going to my throat. I walks in and I've got the transcripts, and we get the first guy and the second guy and the third guy. By the time the third guy shows up, all the transcripts are mixed up on the dining room table of the house. And so I take out the wrong transcript. I said, "It says here you're going to do this and that." And he goes, "No, that's not me." Excuse me. Go back, get the second one. Still the wrong transcripts, but it took me 3 times to get the right transcripts to talk to the right guy about the right car.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny.
You seem very, you've always seemed very calm on camera, like even towards the start, but now do you still have that adrenaline running through your body when you're doing this?
Oh yeah. Because there are a lot of different things that can happen, and I never take it for granted. Intellectually or emotionally, I can channel it. I can put it where it needs to be and set it aside to focus on what has to be done. But you got to be on your toes. You're watching a lot of things. First and foremost, you've got to do the interview, but you also have to command some control of the space. And so a lot goes into that. And
I saw one where the guy pulled a gun out of his. They asked him if he had a gun, and
and we've seen. Look, you go to certain areas, and the concealed weapons laws are fairly liberal, and a lot of people carry guns. People carry guns in Alabama and in some other states. Like you carry a power tool. It's just everybody's got one. And we never had somebody try to use it on me, but we have had some situations where I didn't see it in his belt. It was a cameraman or one of the law enforcement guys saw it and interceded and put it out, and he pointed it right at me and moved it off to the side. But again, not that they were going to use it on us, but you have to wonder, all right, the guy's got a gun, it's legally owned. What happens if we're not there and there is a 13 or 14-year-old child? It doesn't go his way. Or it goes poorly and he has some remorse and wants to destroy evidence, being the kid. I mean, you worry about a gun being in play there. And we've seen some guys have some pretty aggressive long guns in their vehicles too. So if they get
I've seen some of those, yeah. I mean, all the way back into Catch a Predator, but now
Yeah.
too, like they'll be searching the vehicle and they'll have a collection of weapons in
And
there.
if we have a sense that they're carrying, we have a different protocol than a guy who perhaps isn't.
Yeah. The one I was just watching this yesterday. Police officer spotted the gun in his side.
Yeah.
Says, "Do you have a gun?" Yep, I have a gun. Puts it on the table.
Yeah. Pointed right at me.
So stupid.
Over there.
Yeah. I don't know. It is. There's a great deal of risk involved. I am surprised no one has even tried to take a swing at you or anything, but I feel like you'd probably.
It's set up to, prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
They're, without getting too deep into it, there are barriers and places to go, and, it's designed to make it as safe as possible. And, look, a guy who's a predator, he's preying on children for a reason. And part of that reason, in some cases, I believe, is that they're intimidated by grown-ups. And so when they're confronted by a real man or a real woman, they kowtow.
Well, they freeze up. Yeah. A lot of them just freeze up, or they'll turn their back.
By the time we finish doing what we do, they're just figuring out what happened.
Yeah.
So we have to drop on them, and that typically works in our favor.
I do enjoy that. Even when they flee, you still get a chance to talk to them. You say you don't want to do that. You don't want to run out that door, and they'll bring them right back to you.
A little taser action in there.
A little taser action. If you've seen the, you definitely would have seen it, but I don't know, when George Bush dodged the shoe, I feel like that you'd have the reflexes like a cat at this point.
Yeah.
I think you get out of the way.
Well, you develop a sixth sense for seeing trouble come, and the law enforcement teams with which we work see the same thing, and they have a different responsibility than what I have. And so if they see something, they're not going to wait. Well, Chris didn't say we could go yet. That's not how this works. When law enforcement sees something happening, they take control. I have my role within the whole situation, but I get out of their way, and we sort it out after it gets settled. And that's the way it has to be anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit different. I remember To Catch a Predator. That's the only line that I miss is, unless you have anything else you'd like to say, you're free to walk right out the door.
Right.
And then, they'd get tackled. There was a guy in a ghillie suit in one episode, which is iconic, of course. But, I understand why it's different now, for sure.
Well, we've evolved, and with any worthwhile endeavor, you have to evolve with the changing technology, the changing nature of the crime, the changing nature of how you gather evidence. It wouldn't work the way we first did it today, and nor should it. We should evolve with it, and that's what's made it, last this long.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about this before, and I had always been under the impression that the whole thing with the assistant district attorney was what ended the show, but it wasn't totally.
No.
But
no,
were you present at the scene during that? Like when they surrounded his house?
Yeah, we were there with a crew.
Yeah.
And look, nobody wanted that to happen. And, we took criticism for it. And, there's a lawsuit over it. But I can tell you this, that you had a guy who was an officer of the court who was sworn to prosecute criminals. And over the course of an evening, even a little bit longer, he engaged in sexually charged conversations with two decoys who were posing as 13-year-old boys.
Yeah.
Now, he never traveled to the house, but he didn't break the law in the eyes of the Murphy, Texas Police Department. And so based on that, they went to his house and they attempted to arrest him. When they went in the house, he had already tried to get the hard drive out of his laptop, was unsuccessful. As they were coming down the hall, he pulled out an old pistol and shot himself. Again, nobody wanted that to happen. But when you look at it all these years later, you understand that also on that computer, and the reason why he was trying to take the hard drive out, authorities believe now, was because he had images, and they found these, of child pornography. Now, he knew as an assistant prosecutor that he faced up to 10 years per image in prison. Later, we find out through investigators that there was also evidence on that computer that led to the successful prosecution of his boss, the elected DA of that county where he lived, which is a different county from where we did the investigation, who went to federal prison.
Real? I didn't know that part of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that's crazy.
Yeah. So there was a lot more going on there than just us rushing it. And people, some critics at the time said, you rushed in there. It was up to me. I'd have rather had him walk into the front door of the DA's office in the courthouse and watch that scene go down and get him arrested.
Oh, yeah.
That's better television
than
going to his house. I mean, we weren't running the show there. Obviously, we were there. We're part of it. But, that's... And listen, we were absolutely transparent from the very beginning. I was on the Today Show the next morning. We laid it all out. We showed what happened. You want to criticize us, fine, but this is what happened. And the reason why the series has continued to work and we've been able to do it is because we are absolutely transparent about our methodology. We had people in the early days criticizing because it was different and it was outside the box and it didn't meet the criteria that some people at the Columbia Journalism Review thought it should meet. We were absolutely transparent. There's no sneaky stuff there. Everything you saw absolutely was reality. And we are painstakingly transparent about our methodology. So, nothing was hidden in that deal.
Well, no, the chats are all very clear too. It's like you explicitly get them to agree to come see an underage child.
They reach out to start the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
These decoys aren't out. Hey, you want to come over here and have sex with me? That's not how this works.
No, their profiles are just sitting there and these freaks are coming to message them, basically.
Exactly.
The assistant district attorney, too, it's just a testament. Like you say, there's been doctors, there's been all types of people on this show. I mean, there's a guy that you rode the subway with. Does that type of thing, what is your view of the human race? Is there trust issues when you meet people? Do you ever take a little while to warm up to somebody?
No, I've got a very close circle of friends and family and I'm very fortunate to have the circle of people I have professionally and personally. What you realize is that sometimes people aren't who they say they are. But if you scratch just a little deeper, you would know that the guy on the commuter train was perhaps predisposed to that sort of activity. But I didn't know him outside the train. He wasn't a social
No, you
friend.
would just see him.
I mean, he was in the club
Casual talk.
Yeah, I didn't even recognize him. Well, I recognized him as somebody familiar when he walked into the Sting House.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys who was kind of on the periphery of conversations that I'd be having with, guys who were friends of mine on the train. But he was never, I never saw him except on the train. But I saw him and he said, Chris, no, it's not what it looks like. And I thought, God, why do I know him? And I called a buddy from the train who was a real buddy. I said, who's that guy? He's in real estate or whatever. He goes, oh, Charles Lawrence. And then he became Choo Charley forever because being on the train. But he wasn't a friend. Now, after the fact, you hear stories about this, that, or, people weren't shocked or surprised for whatever series of reasons. But, I've never had anybody that I was friends with or close with or respect for professionally who's ever showed up at the Sting. That just has never happened.
Thank God for that.
Yeah, and I don't
that
think
would be terrible.
Yeah.
It's been great to watch the new series. I really have enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. I think we're up to about 150 new episodes, and our production schedule is such that we're operating 6 months ahead or so, and new jurisdictions all the time. So it's going to have a continuing to have an evolving look, and it's
well, even the Decoy home. I've enjoyed the Hall of Fame Predators pictures on the wall.
Yeah.
That's just a little something for the viewers just to see at the corner of their eye.
It's my clever and creative crew who comes up with that. They do a good job with that.
What goes into miking a house and getting it ready and securing the decoy house? I've always wondered that.
It takes some time. We've got different cameras depending on where it is. As you know, sometimes their meetups are at a motorhome or a hotel, and so that's a little different than if we just have a standalone house where we have remote control cameras and put a camera in a teddy bear, or a microphone in a cup with a straw, and it's multiple options to pick up audio. And then when the actual confrontation happens and you see the crew come out, then obviously we got the boom mic that picks up everything. But I'm mic'd with a wireless that you don't see. There's mics around the table. And look, sometimes the guy doesn't go where he's supposed to go. You can't wire the whole house. You got to direct it, and we get out of position. And you'll see some of the episodes that we put the Chiron up because it's a little hard to hear. But my guys know what they're doing. They get it.
Well, it all sounds and looks great what they do.
Yeah, I mean, we've also technology has evolved as well over the 21 years, and so the cameras are smaller, better, crisper. The remote gear is easier to operate and doesn't have to be handmade. It's you buy it in a kit.
Do you ever get any issues? Any neighbors give you guff in the neighborhood where you
not recently. We try to pick locations where that won't happen. We don't want to alarm anybody's neighborhood. I mean, the reality is we make it the safest neighborhood in America, but we also respect the fact that they may not want this happening there. So we pick locations where that's not an issue.
Yeah.
Or try to.
I find it funny too when I don't know if it's happened more than once, but I've seen multiple predators. You've had to shuffle a predator out of the room. Okay, get him in the back.
Oh yeah,
there's another guy.
People always ask, have you ever had him show up at the same time? I said, yeah, happened just 2 weeks ago. I mean, bang, bang, bang. Especially in Marion County where we had 41 guys show up in 6 days. I mean, what did my wife and one of the kids came along to see it. They just happened to be down in that area, and they happened to show up and watch me do 2 interviews back to back. And because the way we're set up, it wasn't like a traditional sting house where once you're in, you stay till it's over. They were able to come and go as they please into this sheriff's command center. But it just so happened that it was just back to back, and they could watch it from a monitor, which is interesting.
Yeah. Well, there's no shortage of predators, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, that's job security.
Yeah. Well, I should probably get you out of here. It's been a fantastic interview. I really appreciate you doing it.
And I appreciate you having me, and maybe we'll get you out on a sting one of these days.
Oh, that would be unbelievable, honestly.
It's a little hard to operate up in Canada, but we'll get something at the border, maybe.
Doing a world tour, maybe, Hansen takes Canada, takes down Canada, takes down the UK.
Hey, we get mail all the time. Communication from Canada. You should come up here, do this. And
yeah. Oh, it's everywhere, right? You're not going to run out anywhere.
No. We've got some international stuff in the works too, which is going to be cool. So
yeah,
more on that later.
Can I get you to say a couple iconic catchphrases that you like to go to? Anything that comes to mind for you?
I'm going to need you to take a seat right over there.
Oh, that is fantastic.
That's not up to me. Now you know, and I know why you're here.
Oh, that's going to make a beautiful intro to the video, I think.
Perfect.
Really appreciate it, Chris.
Anytime.